All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what it is. It's time for the Urban Conservative Podcast. Tonight, we're talking about how we can solve America's home ownership problem. It's time for the Urban Conservative Podcast, y'all. Let's rock.
Welcome to the Urban Conservative Podcast, where we do not believe that avocado toast can save the planet or the world will end, because cars use gasoline. You won't hear that Wi-Fi is a basic human right, or that billionaires are secretly supervillains. Here, we do not believe that electric cars run on hopes and dreams. You also won't hear that anyone who disagrees with us is a fascist, or that socialism will make everyone rich. You won't be gender affirmed or offered any opportunity to share your preferred pronouns. If this causes you any discomfort, please rest assured that we couldn't possibly care less. For everyone else, thank you, and please stand by.
My fellow Americans, it's time for the Urban Conservative Podcast. This is without a doubt the best podcast on the internet. It's about to go down here on the Urban Conservative.
3, 2, 1.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you know what it is. It is the Urban Conservative Podcast. Yours truly, Abdul Ali, with my twin brother from the same mother, no other, Raheem Architect Soto. What's good, bro?
Yo, everything is amazing. I know it's not our usual Monday night, but all is well. Coming off a really, really great weekend. Getting ready to have an interesting week. Doing the newspaper thing, doing the campaign thing. Lobster Fest is this Thursday, so
Lobster Fest?
exciting. Yeah, Lobster Fest is coming up. And I also got some campaign events. A campaign event coming up. If you want to pull up that graphic, ladies and gentlemen, as you know. I am running for Suffolk County Legislative District 2 here in Suffolk County, and I will be doing a Meet the Candidate night at the Hampton Bays American Legion, located at 55 Ponquag Avenue in beautiful Hampton Bays, New York, from 5 p.m. to 6:30. Free food. It's a free event. Free drinks, soda. Come down, get yourself something to eat. Come hear my platform, what I plan to do. If I'm fortunate enough to get the support and get into our Suffolk County legislature, my plan is to have a more safe and a more affordable legislative district to bring back our fair share of resources to our district for the amount of output that we send west. So you send me out to Hog, and I will fight for you there to bring back our tax dollars to our community and continue to, fight to make it a more affordable and safe place to live. So that is Friday, September 12th from 5 p.m. to 6:30. If you can show up, spread the word. You can get more details about my campaign at soto4suffolk.com. That's SOTO for Suffolk.com. You can make a donation, get a yard sign, drop a line, ask some questions, get in touch, all that good stuff. Shouts out to everybody out here, the Southampton Town GOP, the Suffolk County GOP. And I did say, I said Lobster Fest because that's what's happening this Thursday, the Suffolk County GOP's Lobster Fest.
Lobster Fest.
Yeah, you know how we do it.
Sounds...
We out here where the lobsters be. So if you are a registered Republican, come on out. If you ain't get the text message, you ain't in the know. That ain't my fault. That ain't my fault.
So look, bro, we got a very interesting show lined up today, and one of the reasons why this show is interesting is because I think we're going to be able to deal with some of these myths and some of these narratives that surround a very important topic. So, ladies and gentlemen, jump in the comment section. Let us know where you're listening from.
And real quick, before you do the intro, I do have to say I was glad to see this episode, because what happens is that housing and home ownership is an issue no matter where you go. Affordability and home ownership out here is a very, very big deal. So I'm excited for this show.
Exactly. So look, let's jump right in. We got a very special guest with us. Brother I've known for quite some time now. Pleasure to be working with on a very important issue. He's got some amazing things going on. For the first time on the Urban Conservative, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome our good friend, Marcus Martin. Brother Marcus, what's good, man?
Oh, man. So good to be here with you, Brother Ali, and Brother Soto, Ra, as they call you, man. Really great to be spending time with you as well. As you mentioned, Abdul, we've known each other for a little bit of time now, and being in, the market specifically here in Charlotte, where we're both locally resided, we understand the affordability problem very acutely. It's very real, and we're living in it, and we see it. And so I'm excited to open up this conversation a bit further, but also, as you mentioned, dispel some of the rumors around this idea of what could be a common sense solution, and really also get at the heart of some of the challenges, which really is our government and the ability for us to see through current structures and understand that if you can't access home ownership, you don't have access to the American dream. The idea of wealth generation and everything else that we all talk about in terms of the hard work paying off, the math doesn't math right now. There's no way the average American earning average wages can afford to purchase a home. And I'm not talking about a mansion. I'm talking about condos and townhouses and, what people would consider to be, starter homes if you're starting a family. These properties are critical because they actually create the ability to generate wealth. And when we talk about trying to solve for the community challenges we have, it's not a political football to think about people wanting access to the ability to generate wealth and create the safety and security for their families. That's universal. Right. So anyway, man, I know I'm diving right in, but it really is a pleasure to be on the show. My goal is to really make sure I'm able to open up the aperture of conversation and get people to think about the world of finance and how it can actually be applied as it was originally thought of by Adam Smith. When we think of capitalism, it should be a societal good. And there's no reason why that can't be where we are today. So let's dive in, man, if you're ready.
I'm ready. So
Ali,
Ron,
before you do that, so one thing, Marcus, we like to do around here is when we have conversations with people, we like to also have our audience kind of get to know who they're talking about. So, the qualifiers, who is Marcus and how is he qualified to be helping us solve, and offering his opinion on solving the home ownership crisis. So give us that little backdrop. How did you even come into the space where you're dealing with this type of information?
I'll be super brief, but hopefully it can create a little bit of additional information for folks to understand where I'm coming from. So, for over 25 years, I've spent my life working in capital markets in what many would call investment banking. I was very fortunate to enter into that universe and that business. I was very fortunate to succeed and grow. Was fortunate to start my own broker dealer at one point, and was fortunate to lead the nation's fifth largest bank on the impact and the environmental, social, and community, components of their business, but also on the digital asset side, the innovation side. So what I've been able to see from my position working in the banking industry and some of the things that we've been able to accomplish in terms of finding ways to bring these large scale private capital markets. We hear about these trillions of dollars that move around in these markets. And then when we think about, a firefighter, a teacher, or someone working in the community, the translation of all that economic movement, it doesn't deliver anything. They don't really see the benefits of that. It's oftentimes, pinned on top of the local government and some of the local solutions that might be available. But the truth is there is a tremendous amount of liquidity and a tremendous amount of access to that capital where we could be spending more time creating products and financial solutions that are transmitted directly into these communities, our communities, and everyone can win. And they don't have to be value extractive. They don't have to take away from the new homeowner. They don't have to take away from the small business owner. Both the investor who supports that and the person or business who receives the benefit of it can both win. And it sounds very cheesy and corny. I'm sure everyone's thinking that. The reason why I know this to be true is it is the work that I have been doing. So I have been creating bonds and other types of big, securities transactions that generate hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars that go into specific communities for specific outcomes, but have a balance in the way that they're applied so that it can be sustainable, so that you can allow communities to either get back on their feet or get on their feet and then prosper and grow. And to do that creates wealth outcomes that really is what has created America. So when I joined Homium, which is the company that I'm proud to be, the CEO of at the moment, and I'm also the chief investment officer of Impact Capital, which is Impact Registered Investment Advisor. But specifically talking about Homium, it does solve this challenge of creating access to affordable home ownership, and we'll get into that in a little bit further. But hopefully, the credentials are someone who has worked in the kitchen, creating the food that oftentimes most people who are walking around the streets with us, going to church and spending time with us, aren't able to eat. And my goal has been for the last 15 or so years of my 25 plus year career to move closer to be in a position to drive solutions that allow for the kitchen to cook and for the people to eat.
Love it. So let's jump into something here. There's this thing, Marcus, that we hear a lot, and my brother and I hear this term. And one thing you got to know about the way we are on this podcast is we're students, we're perpetual students, right? So when people say affordable housing, Rob, where did you want? Because I think that's a great place to start. Is the question, what the hell do people mean when they say affordable house? Like, what does that mean?
Yeah, it's an onion like everything else. It's layers. So let's just start at the highest level. When you hear the term affordable housing, historically that has implications around creating funding and financing structures for traditionally large developers or developers to build multifamily housing that creates rentals. Now that is an important component of housing stability, but the idea of a housing affordability, again, really harkens to the concept of affordable rents, and that is critical. But being in a place where you feel like you can afford a rent is very different than being in a place where you can afford ownership, because affording ownership, which can ultimately in many ways cost you the same thing, which people don't realize, we can get into the dispel those myths. But the ability to shift this conversation from housing affordability to affordable home ownership is a huge sea change in the way we think, even up to the highest levels of government, when we think about what our government agencies do, what HUD does, what the Department of Interior does and can do with the land that they plan on building new, units on potentially, right? All of these government agencies have spent a good number of years, decades, focusing on affordable housing, which again, we know is important, but that purely translates in my mind into those who are in the housing space to rentals. We're talking about ownership.
I'm glad you said that. I got one,
go ahead, bro.
Holly. I got a narrative. So one of the things that came up for me was that, and I don't know if it's something to dispel or what your take is, but I hear a lot of the times that, and this is being promoted, unfortunately, by a very specific group of people, that renting is smarter because owning is too expensive. And I think the reality is that while upfront costs may seem to be higher, rent never builds any equity, right? So, that notion that renting is smarter because owning is too expensive. Well, what would you say to that narrative?
My first question to whoever is listening to that commentary is, do you ever plan on, do you aspire to generate wealth? Because I think one of the fallacies in our country is somehow there's a magic way to generate wealth. Again, I mean, sure, you can come up with some really interesting tech idea, and or you can be a lucky lottery winner. But for the reality of, for most of us in America, you work really hard and find your way into a position of accessing something, owning something, and then generating wealth off of that. If you're lucky enough, you can start moving into investments and other things. But the reality is, if you don't cross the gates of home ownership as a hardworking American, the idea of generating wealth doesn't truly exist. It's possible, but it's very, very complicated and difficult. So the first thing I would say is, if you ever aspire to generate wealth, if you ever aspire to create something that's more than just your time on this earth that you can pass to your family and that can help support multiple generations of your family, if you have that aspiration, you do have to understand how to enter home ownership, because that's the first gate of access to assets that will appreciate. When that home appreciates in value, the wealth that you're generating off of it appreciates as well. Now, real quick, because I know I'm sort of carrying on here, I know you guys want to probably chime in, but the other part to that, which you said at first, was it might cost you more. That too may not necessarily be true. We can talk about how Homium works and how fair shared appreciation mortgages work. But the reality of it is owning 100% of zero is never better than owning a percentage of something, or a fair percentage of something that will appreciate. So you can actually think of the idea of Homium and this fair shared appreciation mortgage that we're providing as this leveling tool. Imagine if you're paying $2,500 in rent right now and you're thinking, wow, I'm being squeezed. The truth is, you really can't even afford possibly the $2,500 in rent. Now, if you start to look at the way Homium can be applied to help close that affordability gap for you, if you're looking at a purchase, again, all things being consistent, assuming you're thinking in a similar area and similar, cost of housing, if you will, ultimately that could end up being less than $2,500 a month for you to own that home with some room for the maintenance, with some other room maybe for, childcare or other things you need to do to run your life. So the goal of home ownership affordability is to allow that prospect who might be renting to look at accessing home ownership and a no additional monthly output or monthly costs, or potentially lower than what you're currently paying for rent, which can obviously give you a buffer for maintenance and some of the things you have to deal with when you own a home. So I wanted to expand on that because there's a couple levels.
Hold up, Marcus. But home ownership is only for rich white folks. That's who home ownership is for.
Come on, man.
That's all it's for. This is the narrative that we hear a lot. That and so is that a cultural thing? And when we come back from this quick break, I want to definitely touch on that. How we can kind of shift and continue to be part of this shift in the culture towards home ownership and towards ownership in general. Ali, commercial?
Quick commercial. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be right back. Hold on, don't go nowhere. Carry Discount and Capital Appliance Repair is your trusted partner for appliance repairs and home services. When you're dealing with a malfunctioning refrigerator, dishwasher, washer, or dryer, we have the expertise to keep you running smooth. Visit us online or call 919-468-5860 today for Carry Discount and Capital Appliance Repair. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back. We're talking with Marcus Martin, CEO of Homium. We're talking about solving America's home ownership problem. We're at a very interesting point in the conversation. We were talking about affordability and what that means. And I know, Marcus, you're mentioning some solutions, which we're definitely going to talk more of. So, Rob, where were you going with that?
Well, the cultural shift, right? I think, and this is just my observation, that there seems to be a missing educational component to this, because I just recently spoke to a group of realtors, and similar to your sentiment earlier, home ownership is like the main driving factor of any community, right? It's the homeowners' taxes that fund your local community. Your school systems are based off of this. So you would think the culture would be the more homeowners we have, the better off some of the communities could be. But I kind of want you to speak to how, because when we talk about solving the home ownership problem, I think we can't leave out that we need to foster that culture of ownership. And so I just kind of want you to speak to what can we do to help move young people towards that culture, and what do you see as some of the things that have taken them away from that culture of home ownership?
And Marcus, before you dive in, I wanna show something real quick. This is where it at. Hold on. I want to show something. This is what we're talking about here, because it says, and I purposefully, Marcus, went to CNN because this is not a right or left issue. An affordability crisis is making some young Americans give up on ever owning a home.
Yeah.
So
answering
what Ross said in the context of that.
It's very real, and I appreciate you pulling it back because it's an intractable problem for our entire country to start with, right? Younger people who are entering family formation and the idea of generating wealth and supporting their families, it is obvious because they're looking at the math that if they go into work that they love but does not pay them some ungodly sum of money, they're not going to own a home. Right. And I'm not suggesting that there are magic tricks in the market right now to do that. I'm telling you, Homium has a real solution. But by and large, the traditional way to finance a home has not changed in decades and decades and decades. For the young people that are around today, they have no idea really when the 30-year mortgage was ever even created, which was one of the most best modern inventions ever created. Right now, it's antiquated now. So when we talk about the cultural challenges, particularly within Black and brown communities, that largely stems from the lack of the trust bridge that doesn't exist and historical issues we've had to deal with financial services firms in these types of engagements. So if you couple the two together, generally speaking, young Americans don't believe they can own a home. And then if you double click on communities of color, the experience with financing solutions, the levels of denials versus other communities, the way that folks have been treated, the user experience has been so awful. They are afraid to go back to try to figure out how to solve for the problem. But what's interesting, and I think important that you all are touching on, is that's not acceptable. We have to understand that if we actually die on the hill as we're climbing up it, you don't make it to the top of the hill. And so we don't need to pause as we're trying to get up this hill, whatever it may be, whoever you are, the ability to find a way, if you're working hard and you understand that you're putting the hard work in, don't give up on the one single situation that will eventually put you in a position to start generating wealth, which is homeownership. But don't go into homeownership blind to the fact that it is obviously a financial and liability and a burden that you have to understand. So I think it's the combination of probably that third thing as well, right? I don't like the term financial literacy. People are generally financially literate. Owning a home is not a complicated concept. Financing it and accessing the ownership and then maintaining it, those are very difficult hills for folks to climb. And so I think oftentimes that combination has created a really horrible outcome, particularly in communities of color, but across the country. And again, there are solutions. And I think part of this conversation is trying to open up the aperture and the narrative so that we have more dialogue around solutions to plug the affordability gap beyond even just Homium. We're going to need more than just Homium to figure out how to solve this problem. So we don't have these posts that talk about young Americans have given up on the one thing that has essentially created the American dream, home ownership.
Yeah,
And I think, Mark, hold on,
I,
before you do that, Rob, when you talk about solutions, one of the things that irks me the most is going back to look at how all of these subprime loans were put out there and how a lot of Black and brown people were put into these loans that they were clearly not qualified for. And that created this big housing bust and, all of that. So just, I think what I'm hearing is just throwing people into the home, just throwing people into a house when they're not ready for it isn't going to solve the problem either.
No, it won't. It'll make it worse. It's the GFC, right? It was the great financial crisis. It was telling everyone they should own a home regardless of whether they could own a home, right? What Homium does is it plugs the gap of affordability so you can comfortably own that home without a bunch of tricks and hidden things and features that you don't know about. None of that exists. It is truly a silent co-investment and it does not charge you interest. And so you're able to look at what you can really afford on a monthly basis, what you might need for a cushion. You're able to talk to advisors and educate yourself. You're able to put that whole stack of financing together and not completely rework the concept of home ownership. Just plug the affordability gap in a fair, safe, and transparent way so that you're sharing that exact portion you borrowed of future home appreciation. And we're in a sharing economy. I mean, people are sharing everything they have these days to generate, right? So the idea of a young person being able to find a fair shared appreciation loan like Homium provides you. If you borrow 20%, you owe us 20% back, no interest payments along the way.
Very nice. Rob, what you got?
So I'm curious because there's and I'll use the word sentiment, but there's an idea that and unfortunately I do see it in the minority communities more often, but there's almost like this dystopic view of the future, right? And so I'm just curious what you think about this concept of gentrification, because and it may not apply here in the home ownership, but I think it kind of does. But I like the concept of coming into a community and a bunch of homeowners, and property developers come into a community, they see potential and they invest, and it's like, oh, you're changing the community to kick us out. So is that another education issue there, or is there some reality to that? And from the position that you're in, where they're, running people out of the community? Because in my mind, I'll be honest, gentlemen, if you don't pay your bills, you should get evicted. That's what I think. I think if you're able bodied, you don't pay your mortgage, you get repossessed, or what is it called? You get foreclosed. If you don't pay your rent, you're removed. If people invest in the community and developers and home builders and real and they build up this community. So I guess my question is just kind of how do you see that concept of victimization related to with what's called gentrification of communities or upkeeping of communities and groups of homeowners coming in and buying a property? Like, kind of what's your take on that?
It's so local. It's hard to give any one universal take on the concept of gentrification. What I would say is, I was not here however many decades ago when a lot of the housing financing structures were put together and they continue to be perpetuated. I'm here today to say If you have tools like Homium, you can create anti-gentrification strategies if that's your goal, right? You can think of the elderly who can't afford the increase in insurance, or you can think of an elderly person who lived in Western North Carolina and didn't have the same level of homeownership insurance because they had a very small mortgage and they're unable to rebuild their home. You can think of developers coming in and paying top dollar and bumping people out because they can't afford it. Some of that is about the ability to pay bills. Some of that is just about the natural evolution of the marketplace, right? So to combat marketplace evolution, you have to create market-based solutions. And that's what Homium does. So it doesn't try to handicap someone in a race. It doesn't try to cap the returns like a trust like a community, like a land trust would do. It gives the person in those communities, the person who want to remain in those communities, the ability to continue to own their home, retain their home, or access a home as the value of those properties are increasing. And by the way, everybody wants the property values to increase too. It's a weird conundrum because you want property values to increase, but you don't want them to run away so much that no one can afford to get in and be on the home ownership ladder, right? So I think that the outcome of gentrification is something that naturally happens because of market dynamics, but it's largely because we don't have financial tools of dignity that can combat that with a market-based solution, not with something that is purely concessionary and doesn't even generate returns, because that won't be scalable if you're looking to the larger dollar in the capital markets to want to invest in it. So you have to balance that out so that you have market-based solutions that compete with market-based evolution.
So how much of this? So how much of this is? And when I say the this here is the inflated home prices, the out of control in some circumstances rent prices. So how much of this is market driven versus artificial, bureaucratic, manufactured crisis, if you will? What is that ratio in your mind?
Great question. I think because the only entity that's been a stakeholder or participant in this for more than one life cycle, the government side, I think the inefficiencies of market-based solutions from a government perspective, like supporting more home ownership tools versus just supporting the ability to develop more rental units, right? Balancing some of those things out, I think, is the macro challenge and the issue that has generated this macro outcome. And then I think when you think about the value of driving up the value of the home, you are doing that if you hand someone free money. That's what a really, really, really large grant would do. If you gave someone $100,000 and said, here, go spend that on home purchase. Yes, you would be inflating the value of homes because you're giving extra purchasing power essentially to someone that may not have the capacity at the moment to approach it that way, right? Same thing's happening when private investors come in and buy up all the lots or buy up all the new builds or all the homes and then rent them. These sort of synthetic demand structures are creating a lot of this outcome, right? But in the same token, if you lend somebody capital money and you become a silent co-investor, you're not really creating an inflated value of the home. Yes, you're giving that borrower, that person who's creditworthy, that person who just doesn't have the cash to close, or that person who works an honest job, but on a monthly basis, their debt to income can't qualify them for that home. If a silent co-investor comes in and fills the gap of affordability, you're not creating a false sense of appreciation or value of the home. You're just allowing someone to buy a market valued home and compete where they're not able to do so without that silent co-investor, right? So there's some nuance there that I'm sure I'm probably going into too much detail on, but at the end of the day, this is not part of the sort of value inflation proposition of throwing around free money. And it also is a solution that can reduce the burden on taxpayer, which we really haven't gotten into, but is also a critical component to the conversation. That's how you drag the private capital in and start alleviating the requirement of everyone in that community to take the lion's share, if not the entirety of that burden on. That scale has to balance as well.
That's why I asked that question, because here where I'm at in the town of Southampton, for example, building your permitting costs in some circumstances could be just as much as your material cost to build a home.
Right.
So there's a lot of stuff in the way of that. But Ali, we go to the next segment. We're about 30.
I was about to say, we got to take a very quick commercial break to pay some bills. Ladies and gentlemen, we're talking with Marcus Martin from Homium about solving America's home ownership problem. One last commercial break here on the Urban Conservative Podcast. Y'all don't go nowhere. We'll be right back.
The Urban Conservative is sponsored in part by Gyra Family Farms, providing your family with fresh meat, eggs, poultry, produce, and so much more. Visit gyrafamilyfarm.net to find out about their summer farm camp program, events and classes, and their exclusive Farm Share membership, which will give you 15% off all your purchases. Again, visit gyrafamilyfarm.net to find out more.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, you are back on the Urban Conservative Podcast. We're kicking it with Marcus Martin from Homium. So, look, let's do this, Rob, because I want to make sure. I know you all have heard Marcus mention Homium. Real quick, Marcus, tell the folks what Homium is. Give them an idea of some of the programs that y'all are involved in and have launching and all that good stuff. I think that's something important we do before we get to the lightning round.
Absolutely. Okay, so Homium is really the combination of the idea of home premium. Website is just homium.io. But I can simplify. If you go to the website, it may even feel more complicated. It's this simple. Homium is a licensed lender. So we actually provide you a shared appreciation mortgage in the form of a second mortgage. Many people who are trying to find access to home ownership are familiar with the notion of second mortgages and other affordability gap solutions. Home equity investments, which are ultimately contracts, and they're not actually loans that are licensed and compliant within the state that you live in. So what Homium has done is taken all the rigor and all of the requirements that any real quality lender would go through and combine that with technology, really advanced technology, frankly, that we use to reduce the overall cost of operations and provide each borrower with a very solid, clean loan product that doesn't have all these additional fees. And as I mentioned earlier, the idea of going through, a mortgage origination process for many people is painful, because when you start to look at all the fees and all the tick-tacky things that happen as you get through the contract, it just all adds up. So Homium does not charge any interest, which is fascinating. So what happens is, if you are borrowing, let's say 20% of the value of a home, and by the way, the programs we run typically would require you to put something down, not always a large amount, 2-3%. That can come from grants and other means. But the way Homium works is, if you borrowed 20% to access home ownership, you owe Homium 20% of the future value of the home when you choose to sell or cash out and refinance. So Homium is a 30-year loan that matches your first. What Homium really does, though, the magic of Homium is, if you're theoretically able to qualify, you have credit that's good enough, let's say 620 or better, even 580 or better in some instances, and you have a stable job, but you don't have the cash that's needed to close because the value of the home is higher than what you can grab, even if it's a starter home, as we talk about, right? Or let's say the debt to income is too high, you're not going to qualify for traditional first mortgage. So what Homium does is it plugs that gap for the potential borrower, for the potential homeowner, so that they can come into that first mortgage origination process and compete with the traditional Fannie, Freddie, GSE eligible first mortgage market. Homium is, as of last month, officially a community second eligible program under Fannie Mae. And Homium is a lender in 15 different states. And so the first program that we're quietly going live on, and this may be the first time people in the public are hearing about it, is actually up in Detroit. I'll save some of that detail because we are building up for some pretty awesome announcements, but we're very fortunate to have an incredibly brilliant, talented young man who happens to be a professional basketball player that's sponsoring that. We have support from many others and other entities in the city and in the state. We're also planning on launching programs in Utah, in Salt Lake City. And then we plan on launching a program, not plan, but we're working toward launching a program in DC. And hopefully all of this happens before the end of the year. And then there's another probably 8 to 10 cities and or states that we're going to be launching programs in 2026. So the goal of Homium is to be that affordability gap solution that is very fair, simple, and transparent, and allow the buyer to plug the gap so that they can go into the traditional private mortgage market and compete like any other dignified, hardworking American to access the funding at a rate that they can afford on a monthly basis to own a home. And we're really excited about what the outcomes will be, because we'll be essentially co-investors and partners, silent, but rooting for those homeowners, rooting for those communities and rooting for
Hold
the
on.
outcomes that we know to build. Go
So
ahead.
Marcus, I got to jump in here because what happens is
Yes, sir.
we talk to folks that and I think the people who may need to get this and need to understand this. So what this sounds like is a solution. That's what this sounds like. And it also
Yeah.
sounds like municipalities should take notice of this. It sounds like the people, especially that are in leadership, that can make the type of decisions for their municipal, governments to get involved or bring this program, they should. Am I hearing this wrong?
No, 100% right. Because what this does is it drives efficiency with taxpayer dollars and creates better outcomes for everyone. So it is absolutely spot on. This is a solution that we should expect every housing finance agency, every public housing authority, every state, every city that has housing and stability divisions, and particularly those that are providing first mortgages, those that are providing HUD and Fannie and Freddie product, those organizations, those governments, those leaders, those elected officials, they should be paying attention to these solutions so that they can actually provide the revitalization and the rebuilding or the building for the first time in certain communities in their neighborhoods. This is absolutely a tool for them. And then that then opens up the floodgates for private capital to support that mission and start to reduce the burden that government is undertaking to solve this intractable problem.
All right.
Wow.
So Ali, I ask that question because so many of our, the people that watch this show, they're civically engaged, and these are the type of solutions. Unfortunately, or maybe fortunately for those that are in power that keep getting elected and don't present new, it's both sides. But when you have a solution like this, you need to have elected officials who are in the know and are plugged into, potential long-term solutions that will help your community. And programs like this, companies like this, I personally think we should be introducing this concept to our community members, to our elected leaderships, like I said, at our town levels, at our local municipal levels, because at the end of the day, here on the East End, for example, we keep talking about affordability, and it's like, yeah, we'll let you develop, put 10 affordable housing units in there, which are, the rent's going to be a little bit cheaper, but there's no ownership in that. So, you have this political influence of this large developer and these people and all the things you don't want that usually don't come with home ownership.
And I
And then
think
you're
It's
there's
an
paying
one
easy
other
shortcut.
There's a
Yeah.
tag on to that too, though, and I think this goes back to what we were talking about before, Marcus. You can tell the difference in a community of owners versus a community of renters. So when we talk about quality of life, we talk about quality of community. I think there is a vast difference to what home ownership provides for the sake of communities at large.
Everyone wants the same thing. And to the point about political leadership, having the political will to try to innovate and do something that really solves a challenge that is a problem for the whole country, one would think that that's a pretty easy goal to try to address if you had solutions. And so your listeners are concerned citizens. Some folks that I know that listen to this podcast are in government. I appreciate you opening that element of the conversation, because for all the concerned listeners who are in parts of the country that don't have these types of fair tools, you see homeowns not there, ask why, right? For those who are in an elected position, start talking internally about the reason why we're not willing to do something like this. This is not a political or ideological football. This is truly trying to bring back the American dream. And we're very fortunate at Homium because everyone who listens closely to what the problem is and what the solution could be with a Homium tool, it's obvious. Now, the challenge is breaking down, right, the legacy infrastructure that some folks hide behind and really putting solutions like this out there to challenge really both sides of the aisle to actually step up and solve the problem for the working class.
That's
All right,
it.
so
See, Ali, that's
yeah.
what I was trying to. Now we can go. I was trying to get to that part because this is not a partisan issue. Like having somewhere to live and building wealth is
Right.
not a political issue, and it's a little more than a slogan. So go ahead, though. I know what you're about to do. Go
All
ahead.
right, Marcus. So listen, first time on the Urban Conservative podcast, we have a tradition around these parts that we did not tell you about off air, but it is about that time, ladies and gentlemen. Y'all know what it is. First time on the Urban Conservative. That means Marcus has to go through the lightning round. We're going to ask you some questions. You're going to give us a one word or brief answer as quickly as you possibly can. If you make it through the lightning round, we will give you the screen big with the Homium logo for you to plug away. Rod, you ready?
Go ahead. You got to do the first two because I'm pulling something up.
All right. All right. You ready, Marcus?
Let's
Okay.
go. Let's go.
Eric B. and Rakim or Big Daddy Kane?
Eric B. and Rakim.
Ooh. Okay.
Okay. All right.
You
All right.
you good? Right?
Nike or Adidas?
Anything but Nike.
Okay. Go ahead, Ollie.
No Nike. So no Nikes at all?
When I was younger, I got so offended by the price that they charged for the Chris Webber shoes and saw how offended he was that I decided I'd never touch Nikes. I've had a few, but I wouldn't touch them. I'd go Adidas, and I hope no one from Nike's listening because I love y'all. I love Nike as a company, but I wouldn't buy the shoes.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead, Ollie.
You ready? Schwarzenegger or Stallone?
Whew. Stallone.
Okay. All right. Go ahead, Rod.
All right. We're gonna do. You're gonna get into a fight, right? It's a physical altercation. It's gonna happen. There's no way around it.
Okay.
Who would you rather walk into that fight with? Would you rather walk into that fight with Orlando Brown or Drake?
Wow.
Oh,
Whew.
It's gonna happen. There's no talking your way out of it.
I'm gonna get killed by my kids, by all my friends and everybody, but I'm gonna go with Drake. And the reason why is because that brother does have a little bit of money. So I'm sure if he's in a fight, he probably also has some backup. I would imagine his backup's probably more sophisticated than Orlando Brown. So let's go with Drake.
So go ahead, Ali. Go ahead. We got two more. Go ahead.
all right. So you've got Cheers or Family Guy?
Oof. I mean, I'm pausing just because I don't know if my kids even know this, but I love Family Guy.
Okay. Dope. Okay.
All right,
What you
last
got, Rob?
one. Last one. So you're stuck on a desert island. You're not leaving. This is where you're going to spend the rest of your life at. You get one meal, right? For each meal of the day, you get one show to watch. Netflix, Hulu, whatever. You got them all, but you got one show and you got one album to bring. What's that meal for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? And what are those other things? What are we doing?
All right. So the meal, my kids would know this. The meal would be salmon, like some sort of salmon with probably some Brussels sprouts and I know it's boring. Some people, I love it, and mashed potatoes. I'd eat that all day long, every day. If I didn't have that, you could just
all
give me
3 meals? All 3?
Oh, I can switch up the meals. Okay,
Yeah,
well,
breakfast,
So
whatever
you
you want,
get-
lunch,
okay.
whatever you want.
so that's
Yeah.
that's my dinner. Breakfast would be something light. Insert, yogurt parfait or something, just that I can keep moving with. And then I probably eat something like salmon on a salad for lunch. I can eat salmon 24/7. If you just gave me salmon 24/7, I'd be okay. And that also
Okay.
works out if I'm on an island where there's salmon nearby. We're good. We're Gucci.
All right, so you got one show to binge watch. What's coming with you?
Oof, one show to binge watch. I don't
And
know
this is
if it-
forever.
So okay, so I don't know. I'd say Sopranos.
Good choice.
Fair enough.
but
One album. You only got
in
one
one
album.
album?
For the
man, this is a diverse set of thoughts in my head. But I'd say the Jay-Z Black album.
Interesting pick.
Very interesting, but it just represents a very fun time in my life. So it's every one of those tracks has a whole lot of memories. And so I'd say that's probably the one album I'd take with me. Either that or something from the Roots, because I am a big
Nice.
Questlove fan.
Fair enough. Ding, 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 ding. Marcus has survived the lightning round on
I'm
the
sweating
Urban
though. I am
Conservative.
sweating. I'm not gonna lie. I'm sweating.
So we have put the Homium website big on the screen. Please tell the folks how they can support, find out more about what you got going on. Anything you want to plug is now yours. The floor is now yours.
Appreciate the opportunity, gentlemen, and really great conversation. For those that are listening, there's all types of areas and ways you can get involved. I just encourage you to go to homium.io have a look. We're updating actually the website here very shortly. So if you hear this in a week or two from the live podcast, it's probably going to be an updated website, but still the same information, probably distilled a little more simply for you. But I would just ask that you go learn and understand the elements of what we're providing and trying to create. And whether you're an interested homeowner, whether you're someone in the community trying to figure out how to make things better, whether you're a politician that's elected, that's your job is to help find solutions like this for your working class constituents, or whether you're just curious in terms of how you can help invest, participate in your own local fund program, just reach out to us. We have a lot of phenomenal partners like Guild Mortgage and other partners across the country that we're working with that are also a critical part of this opportunity, this operation. But you'll get a good sense of what Homium is. I think you'll get a better sense of how you can actually conceive of a fair shared appreciation mortgage. And hopefully that just, drives you to want to act in whatever direction you're going to act in. But we're here to support that because our goal is to create as many homeowners in this country as possible so we can have as many communities that are stable and growing with wealth. We can all experience the American dream. I really appreciate being on the podcast tonight, gentlemen. I know we ran a little longer, but I know we could run even longer than this. So I'm very grateful for your time and for the audience's time. Thank you.
Well, Brother Marcus, as we say when folks come on our show, we know time is the one thing you will not get more of in this life. And for you spending a little bit of your time with us, we are eternally grateful. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been kicking it with Marcus Martin, the CEO of Homium. Again, homium.io is the website to go to find out more about what's going on with that situation. You make sure that you stay tuned to us right here on the Urban Conservative. TUconservative.com is the website. Everywhere on social media at the Urban Conservative. TUC Twins. For my twin brother Raheem Soto, I'm Abdul Ali. This has been the Urban Conservative Podcast. Peace and love, y'all.